Good evening, everyone. Good evening to my students in Readings in Philippine History. We are now on our third week. And this time, we will be discussing the Cavite Mutiny. But before that, let us first review the topic we had last week, which was about the site of the first Mass. I am Dr. Victoria Onyut Ligan, your professor on air. Welcome aboard. After scrutiny of both the primary and secondary sources of information, it was upheld, even by the National Historical Commission, that the first Mass was celebrated in Limasawa in southern Leyte. Therefore, between the two sources, the primary source, which was the account of Antonio Pigafetta, the chronicler of the voyage of Magellan and his men, held a plausible and concrete evidence that the first Mass in the Philippines was indeed celebrated in Limasawa on March 31, 1521. So now, therefore, the controversy about the site of the first Mass in the Philippines is settled. Okay, so let us now proceed to the discussion of our new lesson, the Cavite Mutiny. Many believed that one of the factors that ignited the Filipino sense of nationhood and eventually led to the Philippine Revolution in 1896 was the Cavite Mutiny. This event has been striking for the Filipino people because it gave rise to the martyrdom of Gomburza, the acronym that represents the surnames of the priests Mariano Gomez, Jose Apolonio Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora, who were executed on February 17, 1872. Before we move farther, let us first define or discuss what is a mutiny. A mutiny is an open rebellion against the proper authorities by those who refused their orders. Now, in the context of the mutiny in Cavite on January 20, 1872, it was a brief uprising of 200 Filipino troops and workers at the Cavite Arsenal. They revolted against the imposition of personal taxes upon the order of Governor General Rafael de Izquierdo, from which they were previously exempt. Not only were they taxed, but they were also required to do forced labor, or what they called as polo e servicio. There were two events that actually happened in 1872. The first was the Cavite Mutiny on January 20, 1872, and the second was the martyrdom of the three priests, namely Fathers Mariano Gomez, Jose Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora, popularly known as Gomburza. The Spanish colonial government used the uprising to implicate the three priests and sentenced them to death. Gomburza and several other Filipino leaders were executed by garrote in Bagumbayan on February 17, 1872. However, not all Filipinos knew that there were differing accounts about the Cavite Mutiny. That is why in this course, Readings in Philippine History, both these accounts are included so that students would know the different sides of the story. Let us now check out these differing accounts about the Cavite Mutiny. First, let us look into the Spaniards' version of the story. The event was documented by Jose Montero y Vidal, a prolific Spanish historian. He highlighted the event as an attempt of the Indios to overthrow the Spanish government in the Philippines. In those days, Filipinos were called Indios by the Spaniards. Meanwhile, Rafael Izquierdo, the Spanish Governor-General of the Philippines at that time, magnified the event in his official report and implicated Gomborza, who actively called for the secularization of the church. In other words, Governor-General Rafael Izquierdo saw the event as an opportunity to put an end to the call for secularization of the church. Now, what is secularization? It is important that we understand that particular term, secularization, before we move further on the Spaniards' version of the Cavite Mutiny. Let us first look into this secularization thing so that you could grasp it well and that you could connect it with the martyrdom of Gomborza. There were two kinds of priests that served the Catholic Church in the Philippines during the Spanish period: the regulars and the seculars. The regular priests belonged to religious orders. For example, the Franciscans, the Recollects, the Dominicans, and the Augustinians. They were the regulars. Their main task was to spread Christianity. On the other hand, the secular priests did not belong to any religious order. However, they were trained to run the parishes and supervised by a bishop. The conflict between the regulars and the seculars began when the bishops insisted on visiting the parishes run by the regular priests. The regular priests refused being visited by the bishop, saying that they were not under his supervision or jurisdiction. But the bishop insisted that it was their duty to check the parishes. The regulars threatened to abandon their parishes if the bishops persisted on visiting them. And it happened that in 1774, the Archbishop Basilio Santa Justa decided to uphold the bishop's authority over the parishes. The regular priests resigned, and the resignations were accepted. So, because of the resignation of the regulars, the Archbishop assigned the secular priests to take the place of the regular priests. And to fill all the vacancies in the parishes, the Archbishop hastened the ordination of the Filipino seculars. On November 9, 1774, the King of Spain issued a decree that provided for the secularization of all parishes or the transfer of parochial administration from the regular friars to the secular priests. The regulars felt bitter about it because for them, the Filipinos were unfit for the priesthood. They cited the Filipinos' brown skin, lack of education, and inadequate experience as the reason for their resentment. Hence, the issue became more of racial discrimination. The Spaniards clearly favored the regular priests rather than the Filipino priests. The controversy became more acute upon the return of the Jesuits to the Philippines. The Jesuits were exiled from the country because of certain policies of the Jesuits that the Spanish authorities detested or disliked. However, the ecclesiastical governor of the church, Monsignor Pedro Pilaez, sided with the Filipinos. But it was unfortunate that he died in an earthquake that destroyed the Manila Cathedral in 1863. After the death of Monsignor Pilaez, other Filipino priests took his place in fighting for the secularization of the church. Among those who fought for secularization were the Gomburza, Fathers Mariano Gomez, Jose Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora. Okay, so now you understand or you got a grasp of what secularization is all about. And that secularization is also very important in understanding the Cavite Mutiny and the death or the martyrdom of the three priests.
You are listening to the University on the Air program, a supplemental delivery of lesson materials to online classes of through the broadcasting facilities of the University of Mindanao. This program can be heard in Davao City and the whole of the Davao region and nearby provinces on DXUM 819 kHz on your radio dial from 6 to 8 p.m. Monday to Friday and from 7:30 to 9:30 p.m. on Saturdays. Please send your questions, comments, and suggestions to umontheair@umindanao.edu.ph. Now, back to your lesson.
Now, let us go back to the Spaniards' version of the Cavite Mutiny. So, Governor General Rafael Izquierdo saw the Cavite Mutiny as an opportunity to eradicate the priests who strongly campaigned for the secularization movement. That was why he magnified the event and implicated Gomburza. Actually, the two accounts of Jose Montero y Vidal and Governor General Izquierdo complemented and corroborated. Only that the report of Governor General Izquierdo was more spiteful, in other words, malicious. At the start, both the friars or both the Spaniards, Jose Montero y Vidal and Governor General Izquierdo, stated that the abolition of the privileges enjoyed by the workers of the Cavite Arsenal was the cause of the mutiny. Now, what were these privileges? Number one was the non-payment of tributes, and number two, the exemption from forced labor. Later on, the two, Jose Montero y Vidal and Governor General Izquierdo, included unrestrained press and the proliferation of dirty propagandas, also the distribution of democratic liberal and Republican books and pamphlets that reached the Philippines, and most importantly, the presence of the native clergy who they alleged as having conspired and supported the rebels and enemies of Spain as the reasons for the Cavite Mutiny. In particular, Izquierdo blamed the unruly Spanish press for stockpiling malicious propagandas grasped by Filipinos. He reported to the King of Spain that the rebels wanted to overthrow the Spanish government to install a new king or hari in the likes of Fathers Burgos and Zamora. The general even added that the native clergy enticed other participants by giving them charismatic assurance that their fight will not fail because God is with them, coupled with attractive promises of rewards such as employment, wealth, and ranks in the army. Izquierdo, in his report, lambasted the Indios as gullible or easily persuaded and possessed an innate propensity or an inborn inclination for stealing. What? Inborn inclination for stealing? How rude. Jose Montero y Vidal and Governor General Izquierdo deemed that the mutiny of 1872 was planned earlier and thought of it as a big conspiracy among educated leaders, mestizos, abogadillos or native lawyers, residents of Manila and Cavite, and the native clergy. They insinuated that the conspirators of Manila and Cavite planned to liquidate high-ranking Spanish officers to be followed by the massacre of the friars. They alleged that the coordinated signal among the conspirators of Manila and Cavite was the firing of rockets from the walls of Intramuros. According to the accounts of the two, that on January 20, 1872, the district of Sampaloc celebrated the feast of the Virgin of Loreto with the usual fireworks displays. Allegedly, those in Cavite mistook the fireworks as the sign for the attack. And just like what was agreed upon, the 200-man contingent headed by Sergeant Lamadrid launched an attack targeting Spanish officers at sight and seized the arsenal. When the news reached Governor General Izquierdo, he readily ordered the reinforcement of the Spanish forces in Cavite to quell the revolt. The revolution was easily crushed when the expected reinforcement from Manila did not come ashore. Major instigators, including Sergeant Lamadrid, were killed in the skirmish, while the Gomburza were tried by a court-martial and were sentenced to die by garrote, or strangulation. Patriots like Joaquin Pardo de Tavera, Antonio Maria Regidor, Jose Anpio Basa, and other abogadillos were suspended from the audiencia or the high court from the practice of law. They were arrested and were sentenced with life imprisonment at the Marianas Island. addition, Governor General Izquierdo dissolved the native regiments of artillery and ordered the creation of artillery force to be composed exclusively of the Peninsulares. So, on February 17, 1872, in an attempt of the Spanish government and the Frailocracia, a government controlled by the friars, to instill fear among the Filipinos so that they may never commit such daring act again, the Gomburza were executed. This event was tragic, but it served as one of the moving forces that shaped Filipino nationalism. Now, let us look into the Filipino version of the Cavite Mutiny. Dr. Trinidad Hermenegildo Pardo de Tavera, or Dr. T.H. Pardo de Tavera, a Filipino scholar and researcher, wrote the Filipino version of the bloody incident in Cavite. T.H. Pardo de Tavera stated that the incident was merely a mutiny staged by the native Filipino soldiers and laborers of the Cavite arsenal who turned out to be dissatisfied with the abolition of their privileges. Incidentally, Tavera blamed Governor General Izquierdo's cold-blooded policies, such as the abolition of the privileges of the workers and native army members of the arsenal, and the prohibition of the founding of School of Arts and Trades for the Filipinos, which the general believed as a cover-up for the organization of a political club. On January 20, 1872, about 200 men comprised of soldiers, laborers of the arsenal, and residents of Cavite, headed by Sergeant Lamadrid, rose in arms and assassinated the commanding officer and Spanish officers in sight. The insurgents were expecting support from the bulk of the army. Unfortunately, that did not happen. The news about the mutiny reached authorities in Manila, and Governor General Izquierdo immediately ordered the reinforcement of Spanish troops in Cavite. After 2 days, the mutiny was officially declared subdued. Tavera believed that the Spanish friars and Izquierdo used the Cavite mutiny as a powerful lever by magnifying it as a full-blown conspiracy involving not only the native army but also included residents of Cavite and Manila, and more importantly, the native clergy, to overthrow the Spanish government in the Philippines. It is noteworthy that during that time, the central government in Madrid announced its intention to deprive the friars of all the powers of intervention in matters of civil government and the direction and management of educational institutions. Tavera believed that the turnout of events prompted the friars to do something drastic in their desire to maintain power in the Philippines. Meanwhile, in the intention of installing reforms, Sigismundo Morit wrote an educational decree that would promote the fusion of sectarian schools run by the friars into a school called as the Philippine Institute. The central government welcomed this development, which proposed to improve the standard of education in the Philippines by requiring teachers to pass a competitive examination before they could be hired to teach. Most Filipinos warmly received the policy despite the native clergy's campaign for secularization. The friars, fearing that their influence in the Philippines would be a thing of the past, they took advantage of the incident and presented it to the Spanish government as a vast conspiracy organized throughout the archipelago with the object of destroying the Spanish sovereignty. Tavera sadly confirmed that the Madrid government came to believe that the scheme was true, without any attempt to investigate the real facts or extent of the alleged revolution reported by Izquierdo and the friars. Educated men who were convicted for participating in the mutiny were sentenced to life imprisonment, while members of the native clergy headed by the Gomburza were tried and executed by Garrote. This episode led to the awakening of nationalism and eventually to the outbreak of Philippine Revolution of 1896. The French writer Edmond Plouchet account complemented Tavera's account by confirming that the event happened due to the discontentment of the arsenal workers and soldiers in Cavite Fort. The Frenchman, however, dwelt more on the execution of the 3 martyr priests, which he actually witnessed.
You are listening to the University on the Air program on 819DXUM, a part of the online blended education platform of the university under the new normal, and in honor of the legacy of Attorney Guillermo E. Torres Sr., founder of the University of Mindanao and the University of Mindanao Broadcasting Network. Now, back to your lesson.
Now let us unravel the truth. Considering the accounts of the 1872 Cavite Mutiny, there were some basic facts that remained consistent. First, all accounts claimed that there was dissatisfaction among the workers of the arsenal, as well as the members of the native army, after their privileges were withdrawn by General Izquierdo. Second, the rigid policies introduced by Governor General Izquierdo made the Filipinos to move and to turn away from Spanish government out of disgust. Third, the failure of the central government to conduct an investigation on what truly transpired on January 20, 1872, but relied simply on reports of Izquierdo and the friars and the opinion of the public. Fourth, in 1872, the central government in Spain decided to deprive the friars the power to intervene in government affairs as well as in the direction and management of schools, prompting them to commit frantic moves to extend their stay and their power. Fifth, the Filipino clergy members actively participated in the secularization movement to allow Filipino priests to take hold of the parishes in the country, making them prey to the rage of the friars. Sixth, Filipinos during the time were active participants and responded to what they deemed as injustices. Lastly, the execution of Gumburza was a blunder on the part of the Spanish government, for the action severed the feelings of the Filipinos, and the event inspired Filipino patriots to call for reforms and eventually independence. There may be different versions of the event, but one thing is certain: the 1872 Cavite Mutiny paved the way for a momentous 1898. The road to independence was rough. Many patriots, named and unnamed, shed their blood to attain reforms and achieve independence. According to the writer Chris Antoinette Piedad Pugay, the 12th of June, 1898, may be a glorious event for us, but we should not forget that before we came across to victory, our forefathers suffered enough. As we enjoy our freedom, may we be more historically aware of our past to have a better future ahead of us. And just like what Elias said in Noli Me Tangere, may we not forget those who fell during the night. So that was the end of our lesson for this third week. And I hope to see you again or be with you again in our fourth week next week. Thank you and good evening. Okay, so that was our lesson for this week. I hope you learn from it and take up the challenge given to you. So this is Professor Victoria Onyot Ligan saying goodbye for now. And I will be with you again next week for another lesson. Thank you for listening.